Today, we have Annie Agar with us. And as the class knows, I am a fangirl of Annie's, and I have told her that I am because I so admire what she has been able to do with social media. And she really took the depths of COVID when nothing was going on, especially if you were in sports, nothing was going on. And so she really came up with her own industry and has really parlayed that into a career that, has taken her to NFL. And um, she has a TED Talk. I just saw a month or so ago you were in New York for a social media conference. And so it's an example of what you can do without going the traditional routes of having a career. When I was starting, and even when Annie was starting, you graduated from college, you got a job in a small market, you worked hard, and you hoped that somebody in Chicago or Detroit or New York would see you, and then you would go to a larger market. You don't have to do that anymore. And Annie is really proof of that. And so I wanted her to come in because I know several of the students already have blogs, you have podcasts, you have a social media presence. So you've already started that journey. And nowadays you can grow that social media presence into a business, as we have seen with Instagram and TikTok. I mean, you can have a career doing that. And Annie really has done that. And I hope you have seen some of her stuff. The first video that I saw of Annie was her in the middle of COVID, the Big Ten doing a Zoom call. And I mean, I laughed out loud. It was funny, but it showed that she knew her stuff. She knew kind of the inside of the NFL, college football, and it really comes out in her videos. So Annie, thank you so much for being with us. It's probably early. I forgot that you were in Chicago, so 8:30 is early, but I appreciate your being with us. And what I want you to do is just kind of start at the beginning, if you will. How you got into sports and really your journey from being at a local television station to really flipping it and making this social media platform the career that it is for you right now. So Annie, I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you said, I was during COVID, I worked in local news and it was a grind. And I tell everybody right now, if you want to start out, local news is great because it teaches you a lot. I did anything and everything because that's what you do at that level. And it was 20-hour days, like covering Michigan State. You'd film all day, you'd try and rush back to get the highlights on air by 10, you'd go on air, do it again at 11, and then start all over the next day. It was a lot. But that's where I was. And then COVID hit, and it was the first time I hadn't worked in a long time because, with sports, you're constantly going, and when everything shut down, it was so unprecedented, nobody knew what to do. And so I had gotten on TikTok, as everybody did during the pandemic, and I had no clue what I was doing. And I think that's another good lesson too, adapting to this industry. Like there's always going to be another app. There's always going to be a new social platform. And instead of being like, oh, I'm just not going to try it. A lot of us were like, especially our age, we were like, oh, I'm not going to get on TikTok. Like I'm too old for this type of thing. But we were so bored during COVID. A lot of us just had no choice but to try TikTok. So I got on TikTok, and it was like a random day in May. I went down, I had moved back home. I lived with my parents at the time because I had no money during COVID. And I was in my childhood bedroom, and I did a TikTok on the Big Ten, like Betsy said, and it had 3 million views overnight. And I was like, okay, this is the thing. Like I had no intention of this going viral, but I think people needed a little comedic relief at the time because everybody was so down with COVID. And, I think it just was a good time for this to talk about sports because we weren't talking about anything sports related. And we needed a little break. So I did that video, and then I started doing the other conferences. So I did SEC, ACC, and obviously there's only so many conferences you can do. So then I thought, let me bring this into the NFL because that's what I'm comfortable with. That was my wheelhouse. And I did an NFL video, and I was like, okay, I can make this a series. Let me do a recap every week, maybe, and kind of have the same humor. And then it started out as these Zoom meetings because of COVID, and now I do like, you know, NFL meetings type settings. So it all started from that one video, and I think that's a huge testament to social media, like you said too, Betsy. It's just so like one video takes off, and a lot of creators out there think, well, I'm just not going to even start because there's so many people doing content. And, you know, if I have this idea, but I'm sure someone else did it before me, doesn't matter. I mean, there's probably people that did like meeting setting videos before even I did, but you know, you can bring a spin to it that other people couldn't maybe. Or, you know, if you're thinking something, if you're watching a game and you're like, hey, this would be a hilarious TikTok, other people are thinking the same thing. Or if you see something happen during a game and you're like, oh, let me just document this. This is really funny, or this is, you know, a really cool storyline that I think happened in this game. Put it out there, because guaranteed other people are thinking the exact same thing you're doing. That's the weird thing about the sports community. I'll put out a TikTok, usually about Green Bay because I'm a huge Packers fan and I get mad at them a lot. But I'll put out a TikTok and guarantee there's probably, I mean, every other Packers fan is feeling the exact same thing I'm feeling, and they'll share it. And that's what gets you out there, is kind of relating to your audience the most. So I found that a ton in social media, and it might just be the sport. I mean, there's other communities obviously out there, but the sports community itself is so alike, and everybody is thinking the same thing during games. So I just find it really a good time to put things out during the season and during games. And I mean, that worked well for me, I guess. So I'm trying to continue doing it. Here I am.
Why did you get into sports to begin with? Obviously, it's a passion for you, but as you and I know, we don't see that many, especially in local news. We don't see that many women doing sports. You almost have to look at ESPN or at national to see women doing sports. So how did you get involved in sports to begin with?
That's a good question. My dad played for the Tigers for a couple years, for 4 years. He was on the team in '84, but he was in the minors, so he didn't get a ring, which we give him a lot of crap for. But anyway, he played for the Tigers, and my family, we just grew up talking about sports. And it wasn't forced on me. We just would sit around the dinner table, and instead of talking about our day, we'd be like, oh, did you see what happened the other day? Like, did you watch the game the other day? That kind of stuff. And I think it was a very bonding thing I have an older brother who, we can get into that. He has a long story, but he has a disability. He has cerebral palsy. And it was just a very common ground for both of us. I mean, he knows way more than I. Like, this man is a walking, talking dictionary. You can ask him who won the Super Bowl back in like 80, whatever. He'll tell you who the MVP was. Like, brilliant man. So we talk sports all the time, and he would challenge me a lot, I think. And that would make me mad as the competitive younger sister. So it just was what I grew up with. And then in high school, I have very controversial teams. I'm a Packers fan. I'm an Ohio State fan growing up in Michigan. And I think it was fun that way because it made me want to know more about what I was talking about, because it's easy to agree with people, but when you have controversial takes, you really got to know what you're talking about. So it was just a fun way to connect, I think, with family and friends. And it was such a big part of my life. And I played a lot of sports in high school. And yeah, I think it just was like a natural, I wanted to continue this and have this included in my life. And that really showed during COVID, because I was so down and devastated, and I didn't really know why. And I mean, my life goes from season to season, you know, like, especially now that it's my career, but I get excited for football season. And then during COVID, we had spring games. So I was getting ready to cover the Michigan State spring game. And when that shut down, I mean, it sounds so weird to say for people that don't know sports or aren't invested in sports, but that's a huge part of life. And I go, you know, now my year is, okay, like Masters just finished. Now I've got the draft coming up. Like, my year goes in seasons of sports. And it was just really weird during COVID. And I think that solidified it too, that, you know, sports is such a huge part of my life. I need to have that as my career. So I think that's kind of where it came from.
And you're right. We have talked so often about, you look back 4 years and you say, did we really do that? Did we just sit at home for 6 months, 8 months and not do anything? And it's so hard to
Yeah.
think about that. But you know, like our business, we're in sports, and we had nothing to promote because there were no sports going on. So it's so weird to sit back and look at what we went through during that time, but everybody went through it. So
Mhm.
so you get into sports, and as I had mentioned to you in my emails, I have several student athletes, and the the class really is predicated upon, if I'm a student athlete and I want to stay in my sport after I graduate, but maybe I'm not going to play in the pros, maybe I'm not going to do this or that. So this is really predicated around the idea that I'm a student athlete. I can take what I know about my sport and I can do play by play. I can do color. I can do something in broadcasting. So when you looked at that as a student athlete when you were in high school, did you think, okay, I can parlay this into a career? Or was it just something that, I just love broadcasting and this is the way I'm going to go?
That's a really good question. And there were, this is coming from what I know now about the industry because there are so many, and I talk to so many athletes now, and they're all looking for that career after sports because even if you make it to the pros, it's a shelf life of a career and you want to continue it afterward. And the biggest thing I found, which if I could go back, because I had a bunch of student athletes in college, I obviously took a bunch of sports broadcasting classes. If there's one thing I could go back and tell all these athletes and my friends that wanted to have this, job after their playing career, my agent just signed Patrick Peterson, and he is so good on the mic. Like he well spoken. He knows the industry. I mean, and he was a great player, obviously. And the biggest thing that I found is people, athletes think that, well, this is my sport. I know everything about it, which they do. The ins and outs. But if you can tell people about it in a great way and you're a good storyteller or you research the industry just a little bit, that gives you an edge over everybody else because a lot of the players don't. Like I sat down with Justin Fields, great guy, speaks pretty well, but it doesn't have that like presence to be even on social media, it's hard to get things out of him sometimes, but you can tell the players that do, like George Kittle, great interview, right? So these guys that know the industry just even a little bit more, or just try just even a little bit harder at being like a bubbly, fun person that people want to listen to on air. That's huge for the industry. And that's really hard to do because a lot of these guys, they want to get in the gym, they want to go out, like that's what they want to do. And I totally get that as an athlete, that's all you want to focus on. But it's so difficult to think about how you can put out content for other people as an athlete too, and as all of us who do content and stuff like that. I've totally switched around the way I think about social media, where it's not about me anymore. It's not, even though it might be my face in videos, I post for other people, and that's really hard to do because you want to post about maybe what you did that day, but then I constantly have to think, okay, is this what people actually care about? Do they want to know this side of me? What do they want, especially now that I'm I guess influence, I hate that word, but like a little bit bigger maybe, or people want to know things about my life. It's so weird for me not to keep it sports related because I don't know how much to let them in. I don't know what they want to know. But social media and this industry is all about thinking about your audience and other people, and kind of figuring out what they want. So that's what I found in making this a career. And athletes in this industry, if they have any kind of, a little bit of presence on air or in social media is a great way to start with that. If you start, I mean, look at like Caitlin Clark and all these guys who have this huge, oh my gosh, sorry, my phone's ringing, who have this huge presence online now, that and all the deals that they're getting because they have this presence online. It is social media has totally changed how that works for people in our industry. So so I think making a career out of it starts with you being open to learning the industry, start posting, start getting your face and your name out there and your content. And it was kind of a long answer to your question, but
No, that's good. And you bring up another thing that we touched on in our class on Monday about owning your URL, owning your content. Make sure that somebody else doesn't grab your name and use it for a website or use it for a social post. And frankly, especially for the females in our class, because there are people out there who do not have your best interests in mind when they do that. What did you face, or did you face anything getting out there? And you do post some personal stuff, but not a lot. What did you face? Did you face backlash? Did you face, kind of the creeps that are out there on the internet, because they are out there in social? So did you face any of that as you were getting established and getting your name out there?
let me tell you, if I get one more DM about feet pictures, I'm just kidding. No, I was a little worried about that because I'm very concerned about what people think about my content and who I am as a person. And I'm a people pleaser at heart. So I get really, I was really worried about that, putting myself out there that much. And I think my family was more worried about it. But I'll tell you what, there was like a rough time after the first football season I got a lot of, it was, I mean, especially with what I'm doing, I'm insulting half the NFL, right? So, and I took a couple shots at these guys. And at the end of the Super Bowl, I took a shot at Eli Apple. 10 out of 10 would not recommend doing that because his mom is on social media and is very outspoken on social media, by the way. And I said something about it was my first Super Bowl, the Rams and Bengals Super Bowl. So I took a picture of myself at the game and I said, I had a great time providing coverage at my first Super Bowl, unlike Eli Apple. It was not good, not good for me. His mom came at me, which then spurred on the entire fan base to come at me, which was new for me. But I thought it was hilarious, and I, took it with a grain of salt because I was proud of the content. I was proud of the post. It was in my voice, is what I had been doing all year. So I'm not going to shy away from it, because one person got mad. But it was tough to see negative comments in your videos and stuff like that. And my family called me every day and they were like, how you do? Like, you doing okay? I'm like, guys, I am fine because, and this was very eye-opening for me because I didn't think I'd handle it well either when I started getting negative comments on social. But for every negative comment, there's like 10 positive ones and you have to focus on that. You can't look into the negative too much or the hardest thing for me was because it's easy to say, oh, they're a troll, like, don't worry about it. But if someone verified or someone back then when verified meant a lot more, but when someone in my industry or that was kind of seen as a legit person, especially on Twitter, because Twitter, all the athletes and, a lot of sports names are on, if someone quote tweeted me and said something mean that I looked up to or something like that, then that would really hit me hard. But none of that really ever happened. And I could lean on those people because they'd always say the videos were great or, it's just a joke, people get over it, that kind of thing. And yeah, and with my jokes, you have to walk this really fine line, and that's hard to do a lot of the time. So I kind of asked for this, I knew this was going to happen. And when people hopefully get to know me in person, they'd never say things that they'd say online. And you just have to remember that. So the negativity is just them being, whatever, maybe they had a bad day and they took it out on the first post they saw on social media. You never know. So I take it with a grain of salt. And at the end of the day, and I tell everybody this, if you're proud of the content, I have a checklist. So is it like, I try to keep pretty clean humor because I know there are some, kids or parents that show their kids the videos, but I want it to be clever humor too, where they're inside jokes only sports fans get, reference like a draft pick that happened back years ago and stuff like that. So if it's clean, if it's clever, if it's true to my brand, and if I know I've researched the heck out of it and made sure every fact is correct, then I feel good about it. And I go through the checklist and put it out there. And if people don't like it, then they don't like it because that's not for them, which the content's not going to be for everybody, but I'm proud of what I put out. So that's really helped out with the whole, if I get a negative comment here or there, but yeah, for the majority, it's been really positive and I still like social media. So that's good.
Well, after that particular Super Bowl, as a Bengals fan, many of
Oh,
us agreed with you about Eli Apple during that
yeah.
game. So,
Oh, that's
so
great.
don't feel that bad because yeah,
Oh, that's
we
good.
thought the same thing. So, I'm going to open up for questions. Anybody got a question real quick that they want to give to Annie? Yeah, Jake, go ahead.
Thanks so much for being here. I had a question on like you talked about it, you even touched upon it a little bit, but like to a certain extent, what has social media become more of like this nagging job rather than a little bit more of a lifeline, which it is for so many people that, oh my gosh, I have to post, I have to keep up. And what is that feeling like of trying to stay on top of everything while still understanding that it is supposed to be fun and that you're supposed to have that cool little conversation with your viewers while it might not actually be a face-to-face conversation?
That's a great question. Yeah. And that's what's really hard. And I didn't know about this industry because, when you work a 9 to 5 job or you work a normal job, you get time for a vacation. And when you're off usually, unless, you decide your hours, you decide how much you work. But with social media, it's so demanding because if I relax for a minute and I sit on TikTok and just want to scroll, I'll see another creator that did an NFL video. And I'm like, I should get out there and do an NFL video because it's so and I'm as a competitive person, that's really hard to really shut off. So I think the best thing to focus on, and I pick up during football season. In the off season, I really focus on having an off season. So I'll put out, maybe 1 or 2 videos a week, and I'll have it scheduled out what I'm going to do, and I make it a little bit more. I put in a little bit more. I guess not effort isn't the right word, but I make it a little bit better of a video. So maybe it's a little bit longer. There's a little bit more to it, so that it keeps people wanting more of that maybe in the off season. Because the whole like, oh, you have to post every day to be relevant on TikTok. From my experience, I don't think that's the case. Yeah, you want to show up on people's feed because you want to be this reliable face that they see all the time. But I think if you're posting consistently, then that's all that matters. But in terms of like the need to post whenever there's a Packers game or like news happens with the Packers, like the whole Josh Jacobs thing, I freak out because I'm like, content, like people, it almost feels like people are waiting for your content and they're not. And that's what you have to remember. Like, yes, you feel this demand to get content out there, and I feel this demand to tweet constantly when, big things happen in the NFL. Nobody's sitting by their phone being like, oh my gosh, what's Annie tweeting? Like, yeah, they'll like it once you get it out there, but this pressure we put on ourselves to put out content is completely coming from ourselves. It's the same with like Instagram stories or Instagram posts. Nobody's sitting there wanting to know what you're doing on vacation, but you think that they do because you want to get it out there. So it's this weird, like, I don't even know what it is. This focus on yourself, I guess. And so it's good to have that though, because then you put the pressure on yourself to get content out there. So I think it's just all a balance thing. So I have this pressure on myself to get content out, and I try like all for football season. I mean, I don't do anything other than put content out. And then in the off season, I'll take a break. Like when I need to just kind of shut everything off. Like I said, I'm a big Midwest girl. So I'll go out to my hometown, which is a tiny little farm town. And then once you're in an environment where you're like, well, there's no point in putting out content. I'm just, sitting in a field somewhere. Then it's a little reprieve, and then I come back and I feel like I can get content out again. So yeah, I think it's just remembering there's no pressure other than the pressure you're putting on you, and that kind of determines how much content you want to get out there too.
Yeah. Thank you, Jake. Anybody else have a question? Yeah, Jack, go ahead.
I was really intrigued when you started to talk about how you deal with negativity, because I think for a lot of people in this industry, when they see negativity on social media, their first response is just, "Oh, shut it off. Like, whatever, I'll look at," but you can't do that. So how else do you negotiate that?
That's a really good question. Yeah, a lot of people too, from what I've seen, and it's kind of it's a lot of women, which I'm surprised by, but they clap back, right? Like if someone has a negative comment, and there's a lot of women in the industry that I've seen that say something back, and that's not really my brand. It is sometimes, like I'll save it for the right moment maybe, but that's just giving the person more attention and bringing the comment to light. And I've never understood that. Like, it's funny if you have a good, comeback, then sure, go for it. Like, I'll give an example. Don't laugh at me, guys. Tyreek Hill. Okay, I posted something. Oh, man, if I ever see Tyreek in person, it's on site. Anyway, Tyreek Hill said something. I posted something and I tagged him, or I didn't even tag him. I just said his name in the caption. He quote tweeted it and said something about you should, if you wanted my number, you should have asked. And my mom's like, oh, that's funny. He made it. And I'm like, no, players, you can't, I make fun of players for a living. I don't want players to like think they can like slide into my DM or something. So I have to say something to him. And my mom's like, do not say anything. It's Tyreek Hill. And my dad's like, go at him. Like, do what you want. So that video had just come out. I don't know if you guys remember, where he got burned by that kid in the camp that he was trying to cover this kid, absolutely roasted by this kid. So I quote tweeted it and I said, appreciate you, man, but oh man, I don't want to ruin what I said. I said, appreciate you, man. But I saw that video of the kid from your camp look like you already had your number. And it blew up on social media. So that kind of come back, like that kind of stuff I'll do. And that kind of, I guess that shuts down the criticism a little bit, or the negative comments, because nobody wants to get roasted on, on a scale like that, hopefully. But usually I just don't even bring it to light. And I guess to shut it off, like you said, or how, people kind of just go away from it. I just try not to read the comments sometimes if there's negative ones, but I also am a big, like, I need constructive criticism. So sometimes the negative comments help. And some people will say things like, oh, this joke was good, but it was like, that's old news or whatever, and if there's a couple comments like that, then I'll take it to heart. But if it's one random one, I'm like, what does that guy know? And I don't even know who he is, it's some like user, blah, 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 whatever. So, yeah, so I don't really like go away from it ever. I'll kind of take it in sometimes, or I'll just read it and move on. And yeah, if that answered your question, hopefully. I have these long answers for a question.
No, that's wonderful. Listen, I am with you about females, because I mean, there would be times like I'm anchoring Sports Center and there would be highlights of a hockey guy I've never heard of. I'm an Indiana girl and I didn't watch a lot of NHL growing up, and I would butcher the name. I would butcher it. And I would come in the next morning and I would have a half a dozen nasty calls, 5 of which were from females saying, why are women doing sports? You shouldn't be doing sports. And I mean, we're seeing this and the whole Caitlin Clark thing, that you're seeing some of the UConn girls taking shots at her. And I'm going, ladies, she is going to raise up everybody. She is going to raise everybody's salaries. She is going to bring more money to the WNBA. Why in the world are you attacking her? I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah, that's a question I get a lot too, is like how, as you know, a female in sports and stuff. But I honestly think the best thing is, and that's why I love what I do too, is comedy is such a an even playing field, because I don't want to walk into some interview or some job and throw sports knowledge out there and try and show that I know what I'm talking about. But as a, you know, to make light of it and make a joke about it, you can get your point across without shoving it down people's throats. So I can, you know, and it's how sports fans talk, right? You know, we roast each other, we roast people. So if I'm, you know, sitting in a meeting or something and people bring up the Jets or Aaron Rodgers and I make a joke about it, instead of being like, oh yeah, I know all about that trade, I know what happened and all this stuff. It seems a little bit more inclusive. And I found that that's really a good way, I guess, to tie in being a female in the industry, and people take you seriously because then you show, you know, what you're talking about without having to show, you know, what you're talking about. So yeah, I'm just very grateful for the comedic side of things, I think.
Yeah, that's a good take. That's a good way to look at it. Any other questions right now? Yeah, JJ, go ahead.
How do you balance creating perhaps what you like on social media with also ensuring that your platform becomes economically sustainable and you get those sponsorships that bring in the money?
Great question. Yeah, when I first started doing all this, and when that first video took off, brands started reaching out and I had no idea what to accept and what not to. And I did a video for one of the first videos was NFL Sunday Countdown, and ESPN had called and I was going to do it for free because it's ESPN, right? The exposure alone would have been incredible. And then I found my agent and she found me and she was like, you idiot, we're not doing ESPN for free. Like, that's what you don't do for free. They have all the money in the world. So things like that, I had no idea about. So I'm very, very grateful that I have the agent that I have now. But even speaking to someone in the industry, especially when you're starting out, that was extremely helpful to me, because then, you know, a contact an athlete or someone that knows someone that's in, or, you know, contact me and I'll hook you guys up with someone that's in the industry or that's an agent and knows what they're talking about with brands. Because just having someone say, yes, like talk to this person, or you're going to ask for this much money. Like I have other creators that reach out to talk to my agent just to know kind of baseline what they should ask certain brands for money. Because that's how we make a lot of our money now is, you know, I have a full-time job. I work for Stadium Network here in Chicago, but a lot of the income comes from these brand deals, and you want to make it sustainable because you're putting all this work into your videos and into your content. You want to make a living off of it. And so the brands that we work with now, when I started out, they were a little bit more like, I would never work for a brand that I didn't like or know about, because that's you're tying your brand to theirs, right? You want to make sure it's a good brand and your followers can trust you with what you're putting out there. And you guys can tell too, right? Like even like Coachella, I don't know if you saw these TikToks about these brands that were sponsoring Coachella. You can tell if the influencers actually use it and like it. And I never want to just do a brand because, you know, that's what everybody's doing and that kind of thing. So we have done a couple things with Xfinity is a really good brand because they worked with Hassan Reddick for a while. So we did like a really cool flipped this house for a family in Philadelphia because he's born and raised there. So that stuff is really cool because then there's, you know, a message behind the brand, behind what they're doing, and it really tied to what I like to do. And then we've done some stuff with Sprint because Aaron Jones was at an event and for the Super Bowl, and all they had to tell me was Aaron Jones, and I was like, oh, I'm there. I will be there. I will switch to Sprint. I'll do whatever for Sprint. So yeah, it's hard sometimes because you want to work for every brand just to get more money and, you know, get all these opportunities and stuff. But I really try to focus on the brands that have a great message and align with what my brand is as well.
Thank you. Any other questions right now? Maria, do you have a question? I'm sorry, I saw you moving. Do you have a question?
Always, yeah. I'm super interested in this. Annie, when Betsy told us you were coming to class, I was really excited because you've popped up several times on my For You page, and I love watching your bits. Especially, I'm a Steelers fan, so I love
Okay.
all the jabs there.
I'm so
Um,
sorry about getting picked.
It's
Wait a
okay.
minute, I didn't
It's
know you
okay.
were a Steelers
Yeah.
fan.
Yes.
Wait a minute.
My mom's whole family is from Pittsburgh, and I'm very close to them. So no, I'm just soaking up all the information that you're sharing. But I'm not super active on TikTok. That's something that I love to engage with, but I'm not necessarily like a creator. Could you talk a little bit about sort of overcoming that mental blockade of like, oh, I'm like a consumer of this, but I'm very interested in this and I have a lot of knowledge about sports and I love the humor aspect of things. How can I make something that's palatable and not necessarily something that's cringeworthy, sort of towing that line in terms of content and watching yourself and critiquing yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is what I've learned about that. So I think the biggest thing that a lot of creators do that are starting out, that's kind of like you said, makes it maybe cringy or makes it seem like they're trying too hard, is they try too hard. Like they put a lot of editing into it. They do like the green screen and they try to make it as professional as possible. But if you've seen TikToks, that's not the case at all. So what a trick that I've learned from another creator, one of my good friends, actually, she does MLB content. She will, if she has an idea, she'll just, and it doesn't matter what she looks like. And a lot of TikToks, that's what people do, right? Like their phone's like right under their face and they just are talking as if it's a FaceTime. That's what she does. And so if she has a thought that she either thinks this would be a funny TikTok or a great idea or, whatever the case may be, just start recording on TikTok, which I love about TikTok because you have 10 minutes now to just go on a tangent for as long as you want. I would start recording it and you can, like cut it and talk the way you would talk in the video that you want to put out there. And then, it might look weird to you and it might seem super unprofessional, but you get your thoughts out there. And then if you either like that video or you now have it as your baseline or your outline for a better video that you want to put out there. So a lot of the time, and it happens a lot during games because things are going so quickly, or, Sundays when I'm watching Red Zone, I'll do that and I'll put out, I'll have a video. And sometimes I'll post it because it's just a pure reaction video. And that does really well because it's raw. People get it. It's the same emotion you put in as if you're talking to a friend. And then other times I'm like, okay, well, I like this idea, but let me hone in on a little bit more and maybe have like a different background or a different setting, or maybe put my Packers jersey on so people, it just looks a little bit more put together. And then put it out there. And it might, like I said, it might feel weird because you're not like putting your best foot forward. You're not being super professional with it, but TikTok is it's so funny. Like TikTok is no Instagram. It's not Twitter. It's its own beast. I'll spend a lot of time on editing Instagram pictures and making sure an Instagram video looks good because it's a little bit more, aesthetic and pretty. And then TikTok, I'm like, I haven't showered in 5 days. I'm going to throw a TikTok up there and nobody cares. So, that would be my advice. And that's just from what I found works. And it'll be different for everybody, but I think that's especially starting out, that kind of takes the scariness away from it. And if it doesn't do well, it doesn't do well, but it doesn't look like you tried to make it do well. I think that's the biggest thing. Because then if it only gets a few likes, you're like, well, yeah, this is my first TikTok video. Nobody's gonna see it right away, or it blows up and then what your audience wants. So it's I think it's a win-win situation and sets you up for success.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other question right now? Annie, I want you to talk about your family. I want you to talk about your brother. One of our students, Atara, who's with us, we were talking about what everybody's going to do after graduation, and she's going to go back to graduate school and study nonprofits, the business of nonprofits. And as you mentioned, your brother has special needs. You have really included him in so much of what you post, and it's really become a cause of yours. Tell us a little bit more about your family and your brother and your brother and your dad and what you guys do.
Of course, it's my favorite thing to talk about. My brother, beside the fact that he's a huge Detroit Lions fan, but everybody has their flaws. He is 2 years older than me. And he was born with cerebral palsy, so he mentally is right on track, like went to college and everything. Says he's smarter than me. That is not true if you ever talk to him. But he so he wanted to be an athlete. Obviously couldn't do that. He has a really hard time walking and has to be assisted with everything, with eating, getting up, he can't live by himself, all that stuff. So back in like 2016, he wanted to do this triathlon, or this race. And he did it with a group called My Team Triumph, which is a nonprofit. And they take kids with disabilities through these races. And he loved it, absolutely loved it. So my dad and I, athletes ourselves, we were like, well, we can do that. It's just a triathlon, right? So we trained for a year, and then we started doing races with him. I went off to college. My dad continued to do these races, and it kept getting bigger and bigger. And my brother kept pushing and pushing. And now they do Ironman races, which are like the longest, endurance races in the world. It's a 2-mile swim, 114-mile bike, and a 26.2-mile run, marathon at the end. And my dad pulls my brother through the entire race. So they had an E60 about them, because then they're such overachievers. As if this isn't enough, my brother one day thought, let me thank my dad for all that he does for me. I want to get out at the end of a race and walk the last mile, which for someone with cerebral palsy, it's like us running a marathon. It's the same kind of test, because it's really hard for him he has to kind of override his brain to tell his muscles what to do. So it's exhausting physically and mentally. And he did a race with my dad and got out and walked the last mile, and ESPN did a little feature on it, because it was just, I still cry watching it, and it's been, years since it happened, but it's just absolutely incredible. I can't say enough about my brother. And I honestly think that's where all this stuff came from for me, because when I was growing up, I tell my parents, I'm going to be on ESPN. I'm going to work for ESPN. And not once did they say, well, let's be realistic for a second. Because with my brother would say, I'm going to, I'd love to play baseball one day. And they got him out on a baseball field, and the kid could barely walk, there's no impossible for them. And now I see that all the time with them doing these races and my brother walking and all that. So my brother now, he does motivational speaking. He supports himself financially. This kid is I just can't say enough about him. He's so great. So the most recently, NBC did a story on them, brag for a minute. And there's like the Super Bowl of Ironman races in Kona, Hawaii. And they did the race back in 2016. And it was like the first big race that they did. And they didn't make the cutoff because it's very grueling race. It's the hardest of all races in Hawaii. It's 1,000,000 degrees. You're uphill most ways. It's just really tough. And they were really devastated about it. But my mom, being like the motivating, faith-focused person that she is, she's like, God's got a plan. Like, there's a reason you guys didn't finish this race. It's going to push you to do it again. It's really hard to get back into Kona. You have to get invited back. Things have to line up. There has to be like a network that's going to invite you back, especially as a challenged athlete. So NBC came this year for Father's Day, this past year. And they, and the guys that they had a Father's Day special planned, they want to talk to my dad and my family. So we're all sitting down in this interview with NBC, and a video pops up, and it's Peyton Manning inviting my family back to Kona to race this year. So they're going back in October to race in Kona. There's going to be this huge thing. My dad's been training like you wouldn't believe. So yeah, so I'm so proud of them, and they're absolutely incredible. If you need some extra motivation, I would go. It's kind of annoying sometimes. I'm like, John, can you not be motivating for like 2 seconds? Because I want to sleep in today. But yeah, they're a very cool family.
And a lot of what you talked about in your, as I mentioned, your TED Talk, a lot of what you talked about was the motivation that you got from your family, from your brother.
Yeah. A lot of it was my brother, his name's John. He looks at the world very differently, because he has, of all the people, he has the most to complain about. He can't even roll over in bed. And you know how uncomfortable you get in bed and you want to just, change positions. He has to have my mom help him roll over in the middle of the night just to get comfortable. So he has so much to complain about. And I have never once in my 28 years of being on this earth with him have ever seen him complain. He's the most positive person. Is funny. He's just like the most uplifting person to be around, and he makes people around him better too. And so in my TED Talk, the TED Talk happened pretty quickly after COVID. And my whole premise of the TED Talk was how I was able to look at COVID differently and saw it as an opportunity instead of this depressing situation we were all in, because of Johnny, because of how he saw things in life. And I'm not gonna get emotional. He just looks at the world so differently. And I try to look through his eyes because I don't understand it. Like I complain at the smallest inconvenience, and he's just so certain that God's got a plan for him. And he's so certain on his purpose in life is to help other people. And that's why he does motivational speaking. That's why he does these races to motivate other people. So yeah, so that was the majority of my TED talk was just, think about things a little different. You don't have to look at the world differently, just have like a different outlook on it. Like you don't have to change your attitude right away because it's hard to do. It's hard to get out of that, that shell that you're in right in a tough moment or in a tough situation. But if you just change your perspective a little bit, it starts to open things up. And at least that's what I've learned through him. So.
Yeah. Oh, very true. Question from anyone real quick? The nuts and bolts of what you post. You have an amazing NFL jersey wardrobe now.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
And probably almost as good of a wardrobe for college jerseys. When you do this, it's quick cuts, it's a couple of minutes, 3 minutes. How long does it take you to A, conceptualize it, B, write it out, C, make all those changes, and D, edit it so you can get it out there on TikTok, on Insta, on wherever?
Yeah, which is so funny because I think Maria just asked, I told her low production. This is the opposite of low production. And I kind of did this to myself. When I started doing it, I edited in TikTok. It was a pretty fluid, it took me a couple hours, but felt pretty confident on it. But then you adapt to things that you learn. So now I use a mic. Now I edit outside of TikTok. I use this app Video Leap. If you guys ever edit, and I edit all in my phone. Everything's in my phone. My audio apps in my phone, everything. So I watch games on Sunday. I research for about 7 hours on Monday. So I wake up, I'll take notes during the games, but I actually want to enjoy the games too, right? So I'm watching as a fan. And then I'll break down game by game. I'll either listen to podcasts or have, NFL insiders on to kind of recap and remember what happened during the games. And then research from like 7 a.m. Monday to 2 or 3 on Monday to kind of go over each game. And then the jokes I might start writing things and kind of have an outline of, okay, this team's going to talk to this team and how the flow of how I want the meeting to go. And then I work out real quick and then I start shooting at like 3 or 4 on Monday and I shoot so it takes like 3.5, 4 hours to shoot the video and then watch Monday Night Football and then throw in whatever happened in Monday Night Football and then go to bed, wake up at 3 a.m. on Tuesday to start editing to get it out by like noon on Tuesday. I overshoot. I know I overdo it because I overshoot things because I want the right inflection and it doesn't have to be that extreme. And my agent gets really mad at me that we don't have someone to edit it, but I'm such a control person that it's easy when you shoot it to know what you want it to look like. So right now I edit everything myself and write everything just because I want people to know that it's all my voice and coming from me, but it's a lot. It's a little bit too much sometimes.
It is a lot. And you do it all on your phone.
I do. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why. And my screen time is like out of this world. I think I spend like 10 hours a day on my phone, which is, I would not recommend doing that, but it's just so easy because I'm already on it and I'm quicker with it. I feel like, so any apps I can use on my phone that get around using, and I think it's pretty much the same quality from what I heard from other content creators and stuff from, using like whatever, Adobe or whatever you use on your computer. It's pretty much the same.
Interesting. I wonder because you have so many quick cuts. I thought, oh, she must be using Adobe because it's like,
yeah. Yeah, it's Video Leap is so good. Video Leap is so good. It takes out the audio. I can overlap things super quickly. It's just a very fluid transition.
Ooh, I got to check that out.
Yeah.
All right. Any final questions before we start wrapping it up? Anybody? All right. Annie, I always end with, what kind of advice might you have for these students? Most of them are involved one way or the other on the media side, whether it's in front of the camera or behind the camera, whether it's shooting. So there's a baseline. They have a lot of traction. And others, as I mentioned, just want to look around and see what the possibilities are, especially after graduation, and what can they do and how can they continue their career. So what kind of advice would you give the students on making that next leap and really looking around, as you mentioned, seeing what the possibilities are, and you don't necessarily have to follow the same old track that we used to follow to try to get into media. So what kind of advice would you have?
Yeah, that would be probably one of the biggest ones is, when I was in college and getting close to graduating, I asked anybody I could about the industry, and I talked to like a lot of women, and it's like Tracy Wolfson, and I tried to contact Darren Andrews, and I followed their career path because I thought, well, if it worked for them, it's going to work for me, right? But now with social media, so different. And I think the biggest thing, obviously you listen to your peers and listen to your, people in the industry that did it before you. But only take it maybe with a grain of salt, because you can do all of these things on social media now that people didn't, even in my grade, didn't even know. Like, social media managers weren't even a thing when I graduated. So I think the biggest thing is to just completely stay true to who you are. This is the biggest thing I found, is come up with, what motivates you and what you can bring that nobody else can bring. So whether it's comedy, whether it's an angle that you have that's different from other people, from your life experiences, from your family, whatever it is, find what motivates you or what drives you. And that's going to come through in your content. That's going to come through when you talk to people. And that's going to keep you on track with where you want to go. For me, like, faith is a big thing too. So I lean on that a lot. But like, I always come back to that, because I'm like, well, shouldn't I be like higher up in my, I've been doing this for 3 years. Shouldn't I be at like an ESPN right now or so? But I'm right where I'm supposed to be, because I know what I'm proud of the content. I know what my goal is in life, and what, comedy is the kind of the focus. And that helps on social media too, because it's very easy to get overwhelmed on social media and be like, well, everybody's doing content, and there's something you can bring that nobody else can bring. And that's super, super important. So I'd focus on that, and just connect with people. And it doesn't even have to be like you reach out to this person that's in the industry to try and get information from them. Just make, be friends with them. Talk about sports. Like, if there's someone that that's in the industry that you share a fandom with, go talk to them. And like, this industry is so much about people, and people forget that sometimes. And we're sports fans. Sorry, I'm gonna go on a tangent for a second. The funniest thing, I think it was Big Cat, tweeted this the other day. He said, it is amazing to me how many people work in the sports industry that hate sports fans. How can you hate sports fans when you should be one, right? Like, you're a fan too, and people forget that. So don't ever forget that this is the reason you got into sports, was to be a fan of the sport. Like, you want to cover these games, right? Because you like the sport. You want to be out at the games. And just don't let the job make that awful for you, because then at that point, what are you doing? That'll be like getting in a position that you end up hating, and then you're going to quit the job, right? Well, you can't quit sports. That would be awful. So just remember, it's not that serious at the end of the day. Like, we don't even know what we're doing half the time, right? You can't look at the people that do March Madness. They don't even, their brackets are busted 2 games in, right? So it's not that serious. Have fun with it. And just stay true to who you are, connect with people. And yeah, and it's a fun industry. I love it.
That it is. And I tell the students all the time, I said, we are so fortunate that we work in sports, and other people are very jealous of us that we get to go to games and we get paid to go to games. What?
Yeah. It's not always glamorous, but it's fun. It is fun at the end of the day.
That's very true. That's very true.